So far, in the last few months, we have dealt with a number of different aspects of the world in terms of thinking spiritually. Can you remember what they are? We began by speaking about space and matters to do with space. Then we spoke about time. Last month we spoke about person, and today we're talking about matter and trying to think about matter and material things spiritually. And I have to say, as I look at this, I introduce this by saying, if you're not challenged by what I say today, you're not paying attention. So a natural person may believe that we would have no thought if concepts of time, space, and matter were taken away from us. That all our thought is based on these foundations. Let such people know, though, that thoughts are limited and constrained to the extent that they derive from time, space, and matter, and that they are freed and expanded to the extent that they do not derive from such things. Because to that same extent the mind is raised above bodily and worldly considerations. And I have to say, looking back over our series of the last few months, this idea of limit and constraint seems to crop up in several places when Swedenborg talks about these ideas. So our thoughts are limited and constrained, and indeed we are limited and constrained insofar as our thinking is based entirely on natural things. Now, we're used to thinking about matter in abstract terms in the same way as we're used to thinking about space and time and person. Here's a lovely example. I don't know whether any of you have seen this movie. It is called Richie Rich, and it was brought out in 1994 and starred a child star of the time down in that bottom corner, Macaulay Culkin. But this is a lovely little movie, Richie Rich. It's about a young boy who is brought up in great privilege. He's very rich and very wealthy, and a very wealthy family, but he's not at all snobbish. The story revolves around some of their hired employees, and one man in particular who decides that these people have far too much wealth and he wants some of it. And so on this picture here you can see they have this place they've called Mount Richmore. Now in Mount Richmore there is a big vault, okay, a big locked vault, and this is on this side of this picture. They've accessed this vault. And this man who decides he wants to take their money thinks these people are so wonderfully, fabulously wealthy that what is kept in that vault must be of great value. And so he spends this entire film trying to break into that vault. And when he gets in, what does he discover? What he discovers are things like this. Now I can show you these later on if you like, but I have a file upstairs in my filing cabinet with what are essentially memories. So for example, I have a couple of Father's Day cards from my children. That's one. That's another one, another creative one I think my son made. And Alicia, my eldest daughter. Pam is very good at cross-stitching cards, and so I have a number of these cross-stitched cards. And then I also have things like this. This is a letter that was written to me by one of my students many years ago when she was finishing piano lessons. I'd taught her for 10 years. But this is the kind of treasure that was in that vault. The man was looking for money, and what he found was memories. And it just reminds me of this saying that we have, don't we? One man's trash is another man's treasure. It illustrates the way that the thing itself is not what is of significance. It's the association that we have with it. Now we have another saying, mind over matter. And these are a number of books, all titled Mind Over Matter. The thing is, we actually struggle to believe this. We struggle to believe that the mind is in charge because the illusion of the importance of things is so strong for us. We attribute so much to the things and the circumstances of our life. We forget that our mental state has a great deal to do with it. So I call this false cause. To say that a circumstance or a thing causes something in my life is false. That's wrong. And at one level we know it's not true, but we struggle. A couple of examples for you. When we were living in Canberra, one of the jobs that Pam had was in a podiatrist's office. And one of the podiatrists was a young lady who was one of the top triathletes in Australia and was competing at an international level as a female triathlete. And I remember Pam coming home and telling the story how this young lady, she said that she saw many far more talented athletes than her give up, put it aside and go and get on with some other career because they felt they weren't good enough. But she, despite her, in her own eyes, lack of talent, had the determination to push forward and become one of the top female triathletes in the country. And that's always stuck with me. Now, it's interesting, isn't it, that when we talk about mind over matter, and when I put it in a Google search, isn't it interesting that when we draw it, the thing that we must draw for mind is a brain. But if you think about it, a brain is a material thing. And that's an important thing to remember, that the mind and the brain are not the same. Yet we often think as though, and we often act and work as though they are. One of my colleagues, David Miller, sent me this video a few weeks ago. It's about an hour and a half long, so you need yourself a good cup of tea, sit down on the sofa and go onto YouTube and find this. This man, Dr. James Davis, he's got a Doctor of Philosophy in Social and Medical Anthropology. He's a reader in Social Anthropology and Mental Health at the University of Roehampton in the UK, and he's a practicing psychotherapist. Now, in this video, he talks about an interview with this man, Dr. Robert Spitzer. Now, that will be a name that's entirely unfamiliar to you, but he is apparently one of the leading, most influential psychiatrists in the world. He passed away a few years ago, but he was the lead editor of a book called the DSM-3, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Now, this is the book that defines mental disorder and mental illness. Okay? There are several other versions of this have been published since then, but a very, very influential book. Now, this was the essence of Dr. Davies' question to Dr. Spitzer. He said this: why, without solid scientific justification, has the number of mental disorders risen from 106 in the 1960s to around 370 today? So we're talking in the early 2000s. So the number of mental disorders has increased threefold and more. And he's asking why. And this is part of this conversation. So, Dr. Spitzer said, the disorders we included in the DSM weren't really new to the field. They were mainly diagnoses that clinicians, doctors, used in practice, but which weren't recognised by the DSM. So by including them in the DSM, we gave them professional recognition. Dr. Davies then goes on. So presumably these disorders had been discovered in a biological sense. That's why they were included, right? Dr. Spitzer says, no, not at all. There are only a handful of mental disorders in the DSM known to have a clear biological cause. These are known as the organic disorders. So, for example, Alzheimer's, Huntington's disease. These are few and far between. Dr. Davis says, so, let me get this clear. There is no discovered biological causes for many of the remaining mental disorders in the DSM, the remaining being about 95%. And Dr. Spitzer says, it's not for many, it's for any. No biological markers have been identified. Do you understand the significance of that? So that book, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder, 95% of the mental disorders identified in that book for doctors have no biological basis in the body or the brain. No biological basis. So Dr. Davis' basic message in his video is that psychiatrists and the drug companies are using material agents, chemical and biological agents, to treat things that are essentially non-biological in their origin. So, what's the cause? Now this is where I turn to Swedenborg's work, and I go to this book, The Interaction of the Soul and the Body. It's a very slim little book, it's very easy to read, you can do it in a single sitting. Interaction of the Soul and the Body. And what Swedenborg presents there is what he calls spiritual influx. Now he defines that here. The soul is a spiritual substance, and therefore it is purer, prior, that it means before, and interior, within. But the body is material, and therefore grosser, posterior, after, and exterior. And it is according to order that the purer should flow into the grosser. So the soul flows into the body. Thus, what is spiritual into what is material, and not the contrary. So what is within the soul flows down into the body, but what is in the body, the material, does not flow up into the soul. This is Swedenborg's essential meaning. So there's no external or material cause for things. It's all spiritual. It's all internal. So any belief or opinion that you hold, any action you carry out, any reaction you have to the circumstances you find yourself in, what's the cause? It's not material. It's spiritual. It's within you. So anything about you comes from within. and expresses itself through the material, but not the other way. Okay, I want to take a quick dive into what we read from Exodus. Moses' conversation with the Lord, or part of it. So the Lord appears to Moses and said, right, I've got this job for you, Moses. And basically Moses comes up with all of these reasons why he shouldn't do it. Okay, that's the essence of this conversation. So back in chapter 3, the first thing that Moses says is this: who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? That's his first objection. Who am I? I'm insignificant. I'm nothing. Pharaoh's not going to listen to me. Why do you think Pharaoh's going to listen to me? His next objection is this: indeed, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? That's his next objection. But suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Suppose they say, the Lord has not appeared to you. And then what the Lord does, he gives Moses 3 signs. Do you remember what they were? The first one was to take his rod and cast it down on the ground, and the rod becomes a serpent. The second one is the leprous hand. So he's commanded to put his hand on his bosom, inside his shirt, inside his tunic, and brought it out, and it becomes leprous. He puts it in again and brings it out and becomes whole, becomes healed. And the third one is the water turned to blood. So the Lord says, if they don't believe you, you'll do a third sign. You'll pick up water out of the river, cast it on the ground, and it will become blood. Now the thing about those 3 signs is, as I reflect on these, they are actually reflective of Moses' own state. All 3 of them. So the serpent represents our sensory perception of the world. And if you remember in the story, Moses throws it down, it becomes the serpent, and then he flees from it. And the Lord then says, take it and pick it up by the hand, and it will become a rod again, which it does. And you think about this conversation that's going on. Moses is saying, look, here's all the reasons why I can't do what you're asking me to do. That's his sensory perception of the world. It actually has no basis in reality. It's just his own imaginings. Oh, what if all of these things happen? But that's his perception of the world as it stands. The leprous hand is interesting because that had a connection with the serpent. You see this, Moses had the serpent in his hand and then cast it down. He then was commanded to pick it up again. You see, so there's that connection with that miracle. The hand represents power, ability. And it becoming leprous shows, it was the Lord showing Moses, well, you're actually giving up your power over this. You're giving up your power when you don't need to. You see, so it coming out of the bosom first shows the reality that Moses is currently in, but then going back in and coming back out is the healing. It's what the Lord offers us if we turn to him and actually give him opportunity to work through our lives. And then the water turned to blood, which is the one he doesn't actually do at this point in the story, is casting out the falsity of his old beliefs. All right, he goes on. O Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and tongue. It's like the girl with the talent, the idea of talent. Oh Lord, I'm restricted in my ability to do these things. I can't possibly do what you're asking me to do. And the last one is this. and it's the most telling. O Lord, please send by the hand of whomever else you may send. Moses has run out of excuses and basically says, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Send someone else. It's not for me. And at that point in the story, it says the Lord becomes angry. What's actually happened is Moses has exposed his own inner nature at that point. We can see it for what it truly is. I don't want to do it. It's not for me. Send someone else. All right. I want to share with you a couple of words from Jesus. A well-known passage. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. We know this passage. He continues, do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them. Now, Jesus is talking about the voices we listen to. He's talking about false prophets, yes, but he's also talking about the ideas those false prophets carry and bring to us. And so it's the ideas that are really important here. But he's also telling us something really important about ourselves. If these words are true of anybody, they're true of us. So if you think of yourself as one of those trees, a grapevine planted in poor soil will always yield grapes. It's not going to yield anything else because it's in poor soil. It will always yield grapes. May not do it as well, but it will always yield grapes. Our circumstances in life, the people we find ourselves living amongst and working with, do not determine the nature of our actions. We get tied in knots about the circumstances we find ourselves in, or the way people treat us. But what we are actually asked to do is to follow the Lord, irrespective of all of that. The basis of our action ought to be the Lord and what He commands us to do, not the circumstances we find ourselves in. So we tend to hold on to ideas like the importance of talent. Am I talented in a particular area? So I can or I can't do something based on that idea. We tend to hold to ideas like, I'm a nobody. I can't make a difference. Who's going to listen to me? We hold on to ideas of, when conditions or circumstances are right, then I will succeed, or I'll move forward, or life will be better, or I'll be happy. We blame material circumstances all the time and deny our own ability and responsibility. Now, can you see why Swedenborg said we are limited and constrained by ideas of time and space and matter? Because boy, are we limited and constrained by that. We are. If you spend your life expecting others to treat you in a certain way and then you'll treat them well, you're never going to reach that magical point where you suddenly become a faithful Christian. It's not going to happen. And let me tell you that the faith that you hold on to is not real. The faith that you subscribe to must come from within, not out there. Not on the way you lot treat me, it's on me. And if I don't treat you well, it's on me. You can see how challenging this is. So I'm going to give you a task for the week. I just want you to observe your thoughts and actions, especially your thoughts. Especially your thoughts. Who is it or what is it that you blame for your circumstances? Or what about your attitudes or your actions? Who do you blame or what do you blame for the way that you act? Where do you attribute cause? Where do you say, oh, this caused me to act in a certain way or believe a certain thing? And just notice yourself doing that and just ask yourself, is it true? Is it true?